بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله. يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة ويا عبرة كل مؤمن ومؤمنة يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولا تهنوا ولا تحزنوا وأنتم الأعلون إن كنتم مؤمنين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. One of the ways an enemy fights you is by the usage of weapons, is by the usage of technology. This is what warfare means. Using technology, using the most advanced weapons to draw upon the most amount of damage to their opponents. Part of warfare is not just to use weapons and technological equipment. Part of warfare is using psychological tactics to scare your opponent. You try to put fear in the hearts of your opponent. That way, you defeat them morally and spiritually before defeating them physically. This is part of warfare, psychological warfare, scaring your opponent. Let me give you an example. In Ma'rakat al-Ahzab, when the mu'mineen were in Medina, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa was in Medina, the Jews, the Ahl al-Kitab of Medina, they conspired against the mushrikeen outside of Medina, in Mecca, and so on and so forth. They conspired. The parties, al-Ahzab, they came and they fought the mu'mineen in Medina. We all know the story of Amr ibn Abdul Wud al-Amiri, who crossed the ditch, Ma'rakat al-Khandaq. The battle of the ditch is also known as the battle of al-Ahzab, where Amr ibn Abdul Wud al-Amiri crossed over and he started challenging the mu'mineen for a fighter. Rasulullah stood up and he said, "Man li Amr wa ana admin lahu al-jannah." Who will fight Amr and I promise him heaven? Amir al-Mu'mineen stood. Rasulullah told him to sit down. Again, who will fight Amr and I promise him heaven? None other than Amir al-Mu'mineen stood. 3 times Amir al-Mu'mineen would stand and Rasulullah would tell him to sit. Why? Because Rasulullah wants to see, is there any other brave man in his army? Is there anyone else brave enough to face Amr ibn Abdul Wud? Finally, Rasulullah gave Amir al-Mu'mineen the permission to fight. He entered the battle, and Rasulullah here said a statement that was so powerful. He said, خَرَجَ الْإِيمَانُ كُلُّهُ إِلَى الشِّرْكِ كُلِّهِ. That all of faith has come out to face all of disbelief. Here, Amr ibn Abdul, he told Amir al-Mu'mineen, he told him, Ya Ali, when your cousin set you to fight me, wasn't he afraid that I will raise you up on my spear in the sky? لا أنت من الأحياء ولا أنت من الأموات. I will carry you on my spear. You will not be considered among the living and you won't be considered among the dead. This is what? A psychological tactic. To put fear, to instill fear in your opponent. But Amir al-Mu'mineen would never have fear. Amir al-Mu'mineen would instill fear in his own opponents. He told him, my cousin, when he set me to fight you, he knew that I will kill you, not the other way around. These are psychological tactics, my dear friends, to scare your opponents. Recently, we've seen the usage of psychological tactics to instill fear in your opponent, to put fear in their hearts so that they lose the battle before even beginning to fight. For example, we saw some saying, we will turn Beirut into Gaza. This is a psychological tactic. Before even starting the war, they're making threats that will turn Beirut into Gaza. We saw it time and time again. They would say, we'll destroy your regime. Your regime will become history. This is a psychological tactic. Instill fear. Your days are numbered. Or as we saw one idiot who said, this is a temporary assignment and it won't last long. And we saw how his assignment ended and the other assignment still lasted. A temporary assignment. Who are you to judge? This is just to instill fear in the heart of your opponent. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. الثانية رحمكم الله. يعني just said. But mu'mineen, my dear brothers and sisters, mu'mineen are never scared. They are never scared. Mu'mineen are not affected by such slogans and by such tactics that will destroy your regime, will turn Beirut into another Gaza, will come after your people. This is a temporary assignment. This doesn't affect them. Look at what the Quran says. الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسِ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ. When people tell them that people have gathered for you, people are gathered to fight you. إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ فَاخْشَوْهُمْ. So fear them. فَزَادَهُمْ إِيمَانًا. Rather, when they are told to have fear of people, rather this increases their faith. This increases their iman. وَقَالُوا حَسْبُنَا اللَّهُ وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلُ. That we have Allah on our side. And He's the best of those who can support us. فَانْقَلَبُوا بِنِعْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَفَضْلٍ لَمْ يَمْسَسْهُمْ سُوءٍ. Not a single drop of evil will affect these believers. Why? Because they're not afraid. They're not afraid. Those who have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are not cowards. It's the opponents that are cowards. They have everything to lose. Mu'mineen have nothing to lose. Mu'mineen are not afraid. They could hear all types of slogans and threats. They will never be afraid. This statement, الَّذِينَ قَالَ لَهُمُ النَّاسِ إِنَّ النَّاسَ قَدْ جَمَعُوا لَكُمْ. This was stated to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi after the Battle of Uhud. You see, the Battle of Uhud was a major setback for the mu'mineen. Why? Because they lost Hamza. Hamza was a leader. Hamza was a major leader. After winning in Badr and losing in Uhud, this was a major setback. But Allah tells them, وَلَا تَحْزُنُوا وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزُنُوا. Don't be tired. Don't be sad. وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ. You will be victorious. إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. All it takes is to have faith. Be faithful. Have faith in Allah. Have faith in the outcomes. Don't have faith in the media and what the media is saying to you or what the United Nations is saying to you. Have faith in Allah. After the Battle of Uhud, after that major setback, when Hamza and these great leaders, they died. But was it over? No, it wasn't over. Yes, Uhud was a setback. It was a major tragedy for the mu'mineen. But it wasn't the end. Maybe the mu'mineen, they had lost the battle, but they did not lose the war. This verse was revealed. They came to Rasulullah and they told him, Ya Rasulullah, there's another battle coming. And the mushrikeen, they're gathering. And they're going to come after you again. And this time they will destroy you. Allah reveals this verse. الذين قال لهم الناس أن الناس قد جمعوا لكم فاخشوهم فزادهم إيمانا. When Rasulullah was told they're coming after you, in fact, this increased his faith in Allah. This increased his faith that divine support is coming no matter what. And indeed. And this is normal, my dear friends. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Every nation, one day they win, and one day they lose. One day it's for you, one day it's for your opponent. But what's important is that you don't lose faith. You don't lose morale. Yes, sometimes losing leaders is something very painful. Something very painful. But losing leaders does not mean it was the end. In Mu'tah, in the battle of Mu'tah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi had set 3 commanders. You see, in all of the battles of Rasulullah, we don't have a case where Rasulullah had plan A, plan B, plan C. Except in Mu'tah. Rasulullah told them that the commander of the army is Zayd ibn Haritha. If he dies, then Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. If he dies, then Abdullah ibn Rawaha. Guess what? All 3 of them died in Mu'tah. All 3 of them died in Mu'tah. The mu'mineen lost the battle in Mu'tah. But they didn't lose the war. Because they didn't lose spirit. They didn't lose faith. Their faith in Allah was strong. Losing a leader is something very painful. But sometimes it makes us stronger. It gives us more faith. It makes us more resilient. That victory is coming. طيب. Instilling fear doesn't work, my dear friends. We saw the mu'mineen in the Islamic Republic of Iran. We saw how they were threatening them. Your regime is over. Your days are numbered. We will destroy you. We will destroy your infrastructure. We will destroy your economy. What happened? We saw how they came out for Salatul Jum'ah by hundreds of thousands in broad daylight. Something that would not happen in another country. They would never dare come out in broad daylight. The mu'mineen, they came out. They prayed Salatul Jum'ah. They recited Quran. They enjoyed their salah in broad daylight. Because they're mu'mineen. Because they're not cowards. They don't go live in bunkers underneath the ground. They're not hiding. Mu'mineen never hide. It's the cowards that go and hide. And everything's normal for the mu'mineen. They travel, they come for ziyarah, they go for umrah. They're living their day as if nothing happened. Because they have faith. Because they have iman. You see, my dear friends, using psychological tactics is very dangerous.
Right.
It's very dangerous. How did the people of Kufa give up on Imam Hussein? How? People of Kufa had written for Imam Hussein. They wrote him letters to come from Medina, to come to Kufa, and there's an army waiting to support Imam Hussein. What happened? They told them, Sayati Jayshu Sham. The army of Damascus, the army of Sham is coming. If you join Al-Hussein ibn Ali, you will be destroyed at the hands of Jayshu Sham. They were afraid. They were afraid. They believed, and there was no Jaysh. There was absolutely no army coming from Sham. But it was a slogan, it was a threat made by Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, just to scare the people of Kufa. And indeed, they were scared and they abandoned Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Psychological tactics are effective sometimes. If you don't have faith, they're effective. Another psychological tactic in war is that you exaggerate your powers and you underestimate the powers of your opponent. This is a psychological tactic. Yes. They say we have the best intelligence in the world. There's no place in the world where our spies can't reach. We have an excellent defense system. Our missiles, our defense, our THUD, our F-35s. طيب. As for our opponents, they use toys, drones, toys, garbage. It's nothing. They can't do anything to harm us. There's nothing that they can do to harm us. This is a psychological tactic. But of course, on mu'mineen, it doesn't work. On mu'mineen who have faith, this doesn't work. They know what they have. Just because they're receiving threats or their powers are underestimated, it doesn't mean that they're going to underestimate themselves. No. Because they have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنْ يَنْصُرْكُمُ اللَّهُ فَلَا غَالِبَ لَكُمْ. If Allah supports you, then no one can defeat you. وَإِنْ يَخْذُلُكُمْ فَمَنَّ الَّذِي يَنْصُرُكُمْ. But if Allah decides not to support you, then who else will support you? وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلْ مُؤْمِنُونَ. Let the believers have faith in Allah Azza wa Jal. You see, my dear friends, the enemy, no matter how much technology they have, no matter how much advanced weapons they use, they will still be weak. The Quran tells us. The Quran tells us that don't be fooled by appearances. Don't be fooled by their slogans. Don't be fooled by their defense system. This is all a show. In reality, they're cowards. In reality, they don't have anything. وَإِنَّ أَوْهَنَ الْبُيُوتِ لَبَيْتُ الْعَنْكَبُوتِ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. Allah sets an example of the house of a spider. A spider's web. A spider's web might be huge. You might see it. It's huge from the outside. And it took hours to build. But a spider's web could be destroyed in a split second. You go and you tear it apart. Because it's not built on substance. It has no substance whatsoever. It could easily be destroyed. This is an example in the Quran. وَإِنَّ أَوْهَنَ الْبُيُوتِ لَبَيْتُ الْعَنْكَبُوتِ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. طيب. They have no faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ كَمَا تَأْلَمُونَ. They feel pain the same way you feel pain. Yes, we felt pain. Our homes were destroyed, our villages. We lost a lot of youth. We lost the best of us. But guess what? They're also in pain. But they don't show it. Their media doesn't show it. They're also in pain. The same way we feel pain, they also feel pain. But there's one difference. إنهم يعلمون كما تعلمون وترجون من الله ما لا يرجون. You have faith in Allah, that which they don't have. Do you ever see them speaking about Allah or God? God will support us. God will bring us victory. No. But look at our brothers and sisters. Look at the mu'mineen. All they talk about is Allah. They don't talk about their defense. They don't talk about anything else except Allah. Because victory comes from Allah. Another psychological tactic, my dear friends, is that the oppressed becomes the oppressor. The oppressed becomes the oppressor. This is a psychological tactic. Yeah. They massacre, they kill, they perform a genocide, they destroy villages and homes. But whose fault is it? It's their fault. October 7th. You started it. You started October 7th. And hence you deserve what's coming to you. We could kill you. We could destroy your villages. We could kill your women and children and destroy everything that you have because you started it. It's as simple as that for them. When the oppressed becomes the oppressor, it's a simple statement making you feel that you are the oppressor and they are the oppressed. Haram. They're the ones that are poor. They're oppressed. So this gives them the right to destroy completely because they're oppressed. You see? See the image that they portray? And there are idiots who buy this. There are idiots in the West who buy this sort of propaganda. And we saw it in Karbala as well. We saw this tactic used in Karbala. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, who was killed at the hands of Yazid, he was made to be the oppressor. And Yazid was the oppressed. Because Imam Hussein rose against the Imam of his time, Yazid ibn Muawiyah. And so he deserved to be killed. When you rise against the Imam of your time, you deserve to be killed. You see how the oppressed becomes the oppressor? This is a psychological tactic. My dear friends, this was a major test for the West. Gaza was a major test for the West. Lebanon was a major test for the West. It was a test of morality. Did they have any sort of morality? Did they have any sort of sense of humanity? And they lost the test. They lost. They saw what was happening in Gaza. And they saw what was happening in southern Lebanon. They saw what was happening, but they gave a blind eye. They decided to turn around and give a blind eye and give a green light to the opponents, to the enemy. They lost. They lost the moral high ground. No, and then they talk about other places of ending war in Ukraine. Why the fuss over Ukraine? A human life is a human life. Whether it's in Ukraine or it's in Gaza. I'll tell you the difference. You know what the difference is? In Ukraine, they're not Muslim. They're Christian. And in Gaza, they're Muslim. You stand by your brethren. Unfortunately to say, you stand by your brethren Christian. And who cares about your, other Muslims? Let them be massacred. The West lost. They lost all credibility. All of them, without any exception. They lost because they saw what was happening and they gave a blind eye and they never dared to use the word ceasefire. They never dared to use that word. They were cowards. Why? Are people in Gaza not humans? Are people in Lebanon not humans? Were they blind? Did they not see the massacres that were happening in these two places? They lost. They lost all sense of morality. But this is not the problem, my dear friends. The problem is not with the West. The problem is sometimes with your own people. When your own people begin to question you. When your own people, they start saying, why did you start this mess? It's all your fault. If you hadn't done this, we still had our homes and our villages and our youth would have been alive. You started this mess. You started this chaos. And they start blaming one another. This is a problem. When your own turns against you, when your own blood, when your own brothers and sisters, they turn against you and they start blaming you, the victim. When the victim becomes the assaulted, the one who assaults, this is a problem. This is a problem. And we hear it this time and time again. If they hadn't gone into war, they would have been alive. Our leaders would have been alive. Why did they do this? Why did they go into a lost cause? A war that was lost from day one. Why did they cause their own death and the death of the youth? Look at what the Quran says. When you start blaming and you start saying, if they hadn't done this, they were alive. Look at what the Quran says. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, la takunu kalladhina kafaru. Oh, you who believe, do not be like those who made disbelief. You see, sometimes it's a small word. It's a small word. It's a small sentence, but it's equivalent to kufr. كالذين كفروا وقالوا لإخوانهم إذا ضربوا في الأرض أو كانوا غزا لو كانوا عندنا ما ماتوا وما قتلوا ليجعل الله ذلك حسرة في قلوبهم. Do not be, Allah says, do not be, all you who believe, do not be like those who performed kufr and they told their brothers who set out for battle. They went to different places to set out for battle and they were killed. Don't say, well, if they had remained with us, if they had stayed at home and not fought, they would not have been killed. Allah says, don't say this. لِيَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ ذَلِكَ حَسْرَةً فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. This statement of yours will become a hasra. You'll become a regret on the day of judgment. Don't ever say this. These people knew what they were doing and they achieved martyrdom. Don't say if they were alive, if they hadn't fought, they would have been alive. What sort of life? Allah says, الَّذِينَ قَالُوا لِإِخْوَانِهِمْ وَقَعَدُوا لَوْ أَطَاعُونَا مَا قُتِلُوا. If our brothers had listened to us, they would not have been killed. They would have been safe. You know what Allah says? فَادْرَؤُوا عَنْ أَنفُسِكُمُ الْمَوْتَ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. If you are true, then try to avoid death if you're honest. Can you avoid death? Who can avoid death? At the end of the day, my dear brothers and sisters, al-mawt haq. Death will come. Whether death will come to me now or in 20 years. But what's important is that I die in honor and in dignity, not in disgrace. Because at the end of the day, I will be put in my grave sooner or later. Sooner or later, I will be put in my grave. A day will come in which I will die. But at least let me die in honor, not in disgrace. A death of dignity, a death to fight in fighting freedom, fighting for freedom, fighting for honor, and fighting for dignity. Another psychological tactic, my dear friends, is questioning the leader. This has been made. We saw this recently. Questioning the leader. Questioning the leader's judgment. They say, for example, your leader, he brought you to this war. Your leader ruined you. Your leader ruined your country. He destroyed your villages. He destroyed your homes. Look what he did to your youth. You see, distort the image of the leader. Distort the image of the decision maker. Pose questions. Question his judgment. This is a psychological tactic where your own people will say, yeah, they're right. They're right. It was our leaders that made a mistake. They made the wrong call. This is the oldest trick in the book. Questioning the leader. Questioning the leader of the motive. Posing questions. And the same thing happened with Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Amir al-Mu'mineen in Nahj al-Balagha, he says, حتى لقد قالت قريش إن ابن أبي طالب رجل شجاع ولكن لا علم له بالحرب. Quraysh said that Ali ibn Abi Talib is a brave man. He's courageous, but he has no knowledge of warfare. You see, when they want to destroy a person, destroy their reputation, question their judgment, question their decisions. Ali ibn Abi Talib is brave, but he has nothing to do with warfare. He has no knowledge of war. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen says, me? Ali ibn Abi Talib knows nothing about war. لله أبوهم وهل أحد منهم أشد لها مراسا وأقدم لها مقاما مني. Is there anyone who knows more about war than I do? لقد نهضت فيها وما بلغت العشرين. I started fighting and I hadn't reached the age of 20. وها أنا قد ذرفت على 60. And now here I am at the age of 60. Questioning the leader, questioning his motives. And this is what happened in the battle of Siffin with the Khawarij. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam did not want an arbitration. Amir al-Mu'mineen was about to advance and destroy the army of Muawiyah. But there was a trick, there was a false trick in which the army of Muawiyah, they carried copies of the Quran and they called for arbitration. The Khawarij, they fell for the trick. And they told him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, we will not fight. We will not fight. Amir al-Mu'mineen told them, don't fall for this trick. They're tricking you. This is a trap. They didn't listen. They told him, no, you're bloodthirsty. You're bloodthirsty. You only want to fight. So they had the arbitration, and then they realized that it was the greatest mistake that they ever did. Why? Because they questioned the motives and the judgment of their leader. Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Imam al-Hussein was questioned for his motives. When Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam rose to fight and he came to Kufa, they said he wants power. He's here for political power. That's his motive. And Imam al-Hussein was afraid of being accused of such. And hence he made his motive very clear. إني لم أخرج أشرا ولا بطرا ولا مفسدا ولا ظالما وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر. That I have rose not to seek power, not to fight for authority. Rather, I'd like to bring reform to the nation of my grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They questioned his motives. Among the psychological tactics is to cause division amongst the ranks of your enemy, of your opponent. Cause them division. Cause them to fight one another. Cause sectarian violence. How do we see this? We see this very clearly. In the current war, they fight, they use the sectarian card. They say it's the Shia of the South. We have no problem with others, but it's the Shia of the South. You see how a group of people are antagonized? A school of thought is antagonized, trying to cause a fitna between the Shia of Lebanon and the Sunnis or the Christians. This is part of their tactic. This is part of the psychological warfare. And on top of that, they use pseudo scholars, fake scholars that come on TV. They wear a black turban, they have a nice beard, they know how to dress, but look at what they say. Look at what they say. They say things that the Mossad would not say. This is a psychological warfare. To use one of your own, put them forth as one of your own, questioning your motives, questioning your intentions. This is all part of warfare, psychological warfare. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa wasallam was in Medina, you know, in Medina, there was Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj, these two main tribes. And these tribes, there was a feud between them. There was a major war between them. Major war. But when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam arrived to Medina, he was able to reconcile between the two tribes and everything was okay. A man came, a Jewish man, entered Medina and he started reminding them of the past. He would go to Al-Aws and he'd remind them of what Al-Khazraj had said about them previously. There was like distasteful poetry said about them. Or he'd go to Al-Khazraj and he would remind them of the distasteful poetry that was stated by Al-Aws many years ago. And he ignited fitna. He ignited fitna, and they were about to start a war in Medina if it wasn't for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah calmed them down, and he was able to overcome the chaos. Otherwise, there were people that caused fitna. They're used by the enemy to cause fitna. Destroying the image of a leader is a normal tactic. You know, when Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam died in Kufa, he was head on the eve of the 19th of Ramadan. Where was he killed? In a masjid. Doing what? Praying. When news reached Asham in Damascus that Ali ibn Abi Talib was slaughtered while praying, they said, Ajib, Ali ibn Abi Talib prayed? We didn't know that Ali ibn Abi Talib prayed. Because this is what negative propaganda does. Look at what Muawiyah and Bani Umayyah had done to the image of Amir al-Mu'mineen, that the people of Damascus were shocked to hear that Amir al-Mu'mineen was killed in the state of Salah. Imagine that. Destroy the image of your leader. And this is what happens. This is what's happening today. Some leaders, they say, yeah, he's surrounded by hostages. Underground. He's living underground in bunkers surrounded by hostages. And we saw how that was proven wrong. We saw how some leaders, instead of fighting underground, they stood on their feet and they fought and threw a stick on a drone with all courage as legends. They said, yeah, his wife owns a $20,000 bag, a $30,000 bag. Nonsense. Why? Just to ruin his image in the eyes of his people. That's it. Just so that his people lose credibility in him. That's it. This is a psychological tactic. The problem is when your own people question you. When your own people lose faith and they lose spirit and they tell you this is a lost cause. What do we have to gain? What is it that we gained? This is a lost cause. All we did was we lost our villages, we lost our homes. This is not our fight. This was exactly said about Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Till today, in some literature, you will find that some say, Imam Hussein fought Yazid. So what? There were two cousins who fought. We should stay out of it. Two cousins fought, and they know best. What was it over? Who won? Who lost? Why did they fight? Has nothing to do with us. This sort of mentality exists. Some today, they're saying this is a lost cause. Why should we get involved? There's no reason why we should be involved. At the end of the day, why should we care for Gaza? Gaza, they're not Shia. In fact, they're Sunni and they're Nasibi. Ajib. Just because they're Sunni, it means we've lost our humanity. They're not humans. They're not Muslims. Well, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in Nahj al-Balagha, in one of his sermons, in his famous sermon known as Khutbat al-Jihad, he says that I've heard that the army of Muawiyah, they would enter upon Muslim households and non-Muslim households. They would enter upon some woman, Muslim and Christian, and they would steal their jewelry. وَلَقَدْ بَلَغَنِي أَنَّ الرَّجُلَ مِنْهُمْ كَانَ يَدْخُلُ عَلَى الْمَرْأَةِ الْمُسْلِمَةِ وَالْأُخْرَى الْمُعَاهَدَةِ فَيَنْتَزِعُ حِجْلَهَا وَقِلْبَهَا وَقَلَائِدَهَا. He would take her jewelry, Muslim and non-Muslim. And then look at what Amir al-Mu'mineen says. فَلَوْ أَنَّ امْرِئًا مُسْلِمًا مَاتَ بَعْدَ هَذَا مَا كَانَ بِهِ مَلُومًا بَلْ كَانَ بِهِ عِنْدِي جَدِيرًا. That if a Muslim man were to die after this, after what, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? After a Christian woman, her jewelry was taken, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, if you would die out of pain, I would not blame you. Having pain over some Christian families, their jewelry was taken. What about seeing Muslims being massacred, women being massacred, children being massacred? 43,000 people have been massacred till now, and you say this is not our cause? If this is not our cause, what is? What cause do we have? Where's our humanity? Do we not see what is happening in Palestine and in Lebanon? Are they not human beings? And then we give a blind eye? My dear friends, the media plays a major role. The power of media is something very important. It has a lot of leverage. And we see our opponents, they use media. And that's why the world stands with them. Because they know how to portray themselves as the victims. Although they are the oppressors, but they portray themselves as the victims. Why? Because they know how to control the media. Being involved in the media is important, my dear brothers and sisters. Speaking out, showing your injustice, discussing your injustice, letting people know of what happened. This is something very important. Very important. As Sayeda Fatima Zahra, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha, why is it that she asked Amir al-Mu'mineen to bury her at night? Why is it that she asked Amir al-Mu'mineen to hide her grave? That's good. And not to allow anyone to witness her funeral? Why? This was a statement. She was making a political statement that I am oppressed, that injustice has been occurred, and injustice has been done to me. And she didn't just want this for one generation or the next. She wanted this to continue for all generations. Today, go to Baqi', Al-Baqi', go to Al-Masjid Al-Nabawi in Medina and ask about the graves. Ask about Rasulullah, the grave of Rasulullah. They'll tell you this is the grave of Rasulullah. Ask about the grave of Abu Bakr. This is the grave of Abu Bakr. The grave of Umar here. The graves of the wives of Rasulullah, they're there. The graves of the sons of Rasulullah, the Imams, the 4 Imams are there. All of them, they're there. Except one grave is missing. One grave is missing. Fatima Zahra wanted people to ask questions. This is the power of media. So that people ask questions. Why? Why do we know all of the other graves except the grave of Fatima Zahra? Why? The daughter of Rasulullah. Why don't we know where her grave is? Why didn't anyone participate in her funeral? Why was she buried at night and not in broad daylight? No one is buried at night. When anyone dies, their funeral procession is in the middle of the day when everyone can participate. Yet Fatima Zahra was buried at night. Why? And on top of that, Fatima Zahra spoke out. She came to Al-Masjid Al-Nabawi and she gave her famous sermon of Fadak. She was not silent. She spoke because she knows the power of media. She knows that if she does not speak out today, history will be distorted. History will say she did not have any right. And Ali ibn Abi Talib had no right because they didn't speak out. You see, speaking out is important. Making sure that people know you're victimized. They know what sort of oppression is taking place. What did they do to Fatima Zahra, salamullahi alayha? What did they do to this household? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam served this community for 23 years, or 24 years. And he asked for nothing in return except love for his family members. قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. This is all he asked for. Love my family. Show kindness to my family. I ask for nothing in return. Look at what they did. Look at what they did to his family. If Rasulullah had not said, إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَةِ, if Rasulullah said, I want you after my death to massacre my family, kill them, massacre them, behead them, poison them, can they have possibly done anything worse than what they already did? Can they have done worse? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Imagine if Rasulullah had not asked them for love for his kin and his family members, what would have happened to Fatima Zahra? The house of Fatima, where Rasulullah would come for 6 months. He would not enter the house without seeking permission. He would knock on the door. He would come and knock at the door and he would say, Assalamu alaikum ya ahl bayt al-nubuwah wa mawdi' al-rasala, as-salah, as-salah. He would wake them up for salah. Rasulullah would not dare enter the house of his daughter Fatima without permission. Jibreel alayhi salam, when he would come to Rasulullah in the house of Fatima, he would seek permission. But Jibreel would seek permission before entering the house of Fatima Zahra. The poet says, وَعَجَبًا يَسْتَأْذِنُ الْأَمِينُ عَلَيْهِمُ وَيَدْخُلُ الْخُؤُونُ. That Jibreel, when he would enter the house of Fatima, he would seek permission. But look at the vicious ones. They barge in like barbarians. They gathered wood and fire, and he threatened to burn down the house of Fatima Zahra. They told him, Fatima is inside the house. Do you know who's inside the house? Inna Fatima fi dar. Fatima is inside the house. قال وين? So what? I will burn down the house, including whoever's inside the house. And so they barged in. The narrations tell us that he asked his slave, Qunfudh, to break in the door. Fatima Zahra was standing behind the door in the wall. And she was not wearing her hijab. She asked them a chance to put on her hijab. Yet they felt that Fatima Zahra is standing behind the door and the wall. They barged through and they crushed her in between the door and the wall. قال سليم قلت يا سلمان هل دخلوا ولم يك استئذان فقال إي وعزة الجبار وما على الزهراء من خمار. Sulaym asked Salman that, is it true they barged into the house and Fatima Zahra is inside? He said, yes, by Allah, it's true. And Fatima did not have her khimar on. She did not have her hijab on. لكنها لاذت وراء الباب رعاية للستر والحجاب فمذ رأوها عصروها عصرا كادت بنفسي أن تموت حسرا نادت أيا فضة أسنديني فقد وربي أسقطوا جنيني أنا قميت للباب لكن ما علي حجاب حسبي الرجيس من لذت خلف الباب عصرني وسقط المحسين وصدر عاب. Imagine what happened to Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, asking them not to come in. Fatima Zahra is not wearing her hijab. Fatima Zahra is pregnant, standing behind the door and the wall. They barged in, crushing Fatima in between the door and the wall. The nail piercing through her chest. aborting her fetus, crushing her bones, crushing her ribs. Fatima fell to the ground and she asked Fidla, she called Fidla. Fatima Zahra was embarrassed to call Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. In that sort of state, she needed a woman to come to her. So she called Fidla. Fidla comes to her and she sees what had happened to Fatima Zahra. آمر على عبده وضربني ومن ضربته للقاع ذبني ولا انكسر قلبه ولا رحمني ومن الناس ما واحد حشمني. They came inside, they put ropes around the neck of Ali ibn Abi Talib and they started dragging him to Al-Masjid al-Nabawi, seeking allegiance for Abu Bakr. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was taken by ropes. Fatima Zahra, she stood up in that state, losing a fetus, bleeding. She followed Amir al-Mu'mineen to the masjid and she asked them to leave my cousin. Leave him alone. If you do not leave him alone, I will drop my hijab. And if I drop my hijab, these walls will fall to the ground. They let Amir al-Mu'mineen go. He comes back to the house. Here I conclude with this. Sheikh Abdul Zahra al-Ka'bi, the famous reciter, the famous orator, one night he saw in his dream Al-Hassan wal-Hussein. They told him, Ya Sheikh, you recited so many tragedies, but you haven't recited our main tragedy. He told him, Yabni Rasulullah, I've spent my entire life reciting your tragedies. Which tragedy I haven't recited? They told him, there's one tragedy that you have not recited. We will tell you what this tragedy is. Ya Shaykh, when they crushed our mother in between the door and the wall, and our mother fell, and she aborted her fetus, and she started calling for Fidla, and then they came into the house, and they put ropes around the neck of our father, and they started dragging him to the masjid. This is the tragedy. We did not know what to do, whether to stay with our mother Fatima or to chase our father Ali.
إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العلي الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. اللهم لا تدع لنا ذنبا إلا غفرته ولا هما إلا فرجته ولا عيبا إلا سترته ولا خوفا إلا آمنته ولا رزقا إلا بسطته ولا شملا إلا جمعته ولا مرضا إلا شفيته ولا غائبا إلا حفظته وأدنيته ولا حاجة من حوائج الدنيا والآخرة لك فيها رضا ولنا فيها صلاح إلا قضيتها ويسرتها يا أرحم الراحمين. ولأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والعلماء والشهداء نقرأ سورة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.